I am not a Superman fan. As a general rule, I have always considered the Big Blue Boy Scout to be one of the least interesting characters that either Marvel or DC have ever produced. To be frank, I'd much rather be stalking the grime-streaked, neon-soaked back alleys of Gotham than soaring above Metropolis's glittering skyline. I've found him boring, simple, and uninspired, always receiving another power-up just in the nick of time like some shonen anime. I say all of that so you'll have some context for my next statement. Superman is exactly the movie I needed, even if I didn't know it when I walked into the theater. I'm going to try to keep things spoiler-free here, so if you haven't seen it yet, don't worry. Ready? Let's jump into it. As I'm sure you've noticed, the superhero genre has devolved in the years since the MCU's Endgame. It's curdled, from being about uplifting stories about heroes from all walks of life, to being a soapbox for political grandstanding and agenda-pushing. Couple that with heinous writing and self-insert Mary Sues and Gary Stews, and what we're left with is a bloated mess of an IP that has many people, myself included, wanting to just take it out behind the shed. For half a decade now, the inmates have been running the asylum, and everyone has suffered for it. Now, I'm not going to say this is a perfect movie. I'm not even going to say that it's the best superhero movie I've seen. But what I will say is this: the earnestness behind every line of dialogue, every brilliantly shot action sequence, and they are brilliant, every joke and every tear-jerk moment was utterly palpable. These people wanted to be here. They wanted to make this movie, and it shows with every single frame. I've gotten so used to cast and crew just showing up to these things to collect a paycheck that I almost forgot what it was like for a team to actually believe in one of these projects. Funnily enough, it's this belief in their work that leads me neatly into my first minor gripe about Superman. That being, they threw the kitchen sink at this thing. Now, before we go any further, I want to say that none of my issues with this movie mean that you shouldn't watch it. From my perspective, this is simply a case of dialing in. Minor tweaks that don't really change anything but help the overall flow and feel. Definitely go see this movie. Now, I've got a working knowledge of DC continuity. I know the big players, the main MacGuffins, and I can generally follow even the more convoluted storylines. But there were points in Superman where I almost got cognitive whiplash from all the characters being introduced and shuffled off, only to be reintroduced again. This is a big cast, and a big story. Especially when you consider that we're being dropped right into the middle of it as the launch point for the new mainline DC cinematic universe. Say what you will about the MCU, but in the early days they took their time to build. Story and character were paramount, and it helped in keeping people interested. This isn't to say that the characters in Superman are poorly written or the story is incomprehensible, but I will say that I struggled to find a handhold on more than one occasion. As a matter of fact, the argument could be made that so much effort was devoted to setting up the world that the plot itself kind of fell through the cracks. To illustrate what I mean, I'm going to have to give some spoilers, so if you don't want them, skip to this timestamp. Alright, let's unpack this. If you're not already versed in the comic lore, the main twist in the movie is that Ultraman is a clone of Superman. I don't know whether they meant to broadcast this or not, but by making Ultraman's costume a knockoff of Black Noir's from The Boys, they tipped their hand pretty early on. You see, in the comic version of that IP, Black Noir is actually a clone of Homelander, which is exactly the tweak they made to the comic canon. I know that Ultraman is a long-established character in DC, and I'm not saying it's intentionally derivative on either side of the aisle. But for me, as soon as the Fortress of Solitude opened up as Lex Luthor approached, I had a pretty good idea of what was going on. Now, not every movie has to have the twists and turns of something like The Batman, but I have to wonder if James Gunn had been a little more focused on the plot rather than the world building, could this little giveaway have been fixed? Moving on, we come to my second minor issue with Superman. And honestly, for the most part, it's not even that big of a deal. This is a bright movie, both literally and tonally. So much so that it felt weird when it downshifted into somber moments or darker sets. The moments hit, don't get me wrong, but they felt strange at the time, teetering just shy of tonally dissonant. For example, there's a scene in the movie where Superman has just been hit by a revelation. What revelation, you ask? Tough. No spoilers. Go watch the movie. We see him at a low point. And as he sits there metaphorically licking his wounds, we've got the Justice Gang, their name, not mine, being funny in the background. It's easy to see what they were going for in this sequence, but instead of the two moments complementing each other, they just reduced each other's impact. The good news is that most of this film is packed to the brim with bright colors, uplifting music, intentionally building off of John Williams' classic theme, and jokes that actually land. And I have to admit, as much as I still feel like Crypto was an extraneous character, that fuzzy little menace definitely had his moments. You know, I realized something while watching this film. That being why I detest the MCU humor these days. It's because it's all based on sarcasm, or it's at the expense of someone else. The Whedon one-liners, as they're so called, originally worked because they hadn't been done to death at that point. It was a fun and interesting way for characters who didn't know each other to interact. But the MCU writers never moved beyond that. Quippy dialogue is all well and good, but when it's all you've got to hang your hat on, it gets tiresome fast. Superman adroitly sidesteps this issue by letting the scenarios speak for themselves, by letting the jokes emerge as part of the situation, rather than at the expense of a character or forced moment. A perfect example of what I'm talking about is the fact that in this movie, Superman doesn't swear. He still experiences the types of emotions that would lead him to swear, but he just doesn't like doing it, instead replacing the words with their PG-rated counterparts. From the outside, it's funny when he does this. He's such an aw shucks Kansas farm boy that it's completely and utterly endearing. There's even a moment where he literally kicks rocks. My point is that it would have been all too easy to have the other characters in this movie deride him for it, to make fun of him for his unwillingness to swear.
Shit! Language! No one else is going to deal with the fact that Cap just said, language? I know.
But they don't. The characters take it in stride and allow the audience to find it charmingly funny rather than make it funny for themselves with some pointless quip. One of the issues I'm seeing that people are having with this movie is that Superman struggles. He gets his butt kicked on more than one occasion and has to rely on others to help him get out of sticky situations. Now, maybe it's because I don't have a dog in this particular fight, but I have no problem with this. One of my main sticking points with the character has always been that he is invincible. He can meet any challenge, decimate any foe, and all he has to do is work on his tan a little and he's back in action. To see Superman struggle gave me a reason to root for him. It humanized him in a way that I hadn't seen before. To see him triumph in the face of such adversity, not because of his powers, but because of who he is as a person, made him the hero, at least in my eyes, that I never knew he could be. Additionally, a lot of his struggles happen because of who he is as a person. He holds himself back to give his enemies a chance to see the error of their ways. He'll stop fighting mid-swing to go save an innocent. He is constantly mindful of collateral damage and tries to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. To me, that's what makes him a hero. His unflagging moral compass when confronted with challenges he could easily defeat if he just bent his rules a little. And I know, for longtime fans of the character, this is patently obvious, and has been his hallmark since his creation back in 1938. But for me, this movie was really the first time that they were able to drive the point home successfully. He is finally the hero we need, the symbol we can all look up to, exactly as he was always meant to be. I'm not going to go so far as to say that Superman has saved the superhero genre. I won't even say that it's pulled DC out of the tailspin that it's been in since the Justice League. What I will say is that it's definitely a massive step in the right direction. Now, keeping an eye towards the future, I can confidently say that despite how good this movie is, DC cannot rest on their laurels. By that I mean the tone and feel of this movie worked this time, but I can see it quickly getting old in much the same manner that the MCU did. Do they have to reinvent the wheel with every outing? No, not at all. But this IP has to evolve as it goes. Stagnation equals death, as the MCU can testify. And while DC is now on the right track, it's still got a long way to go. For the first time in a long time, I'm slightly optimistic about the future of the genre. And while James Gunn may not be quite to my taste, I think he pulled this movie out in a way that a lot of people didn't think he could. Is Superman a home run? No. But it's a solid triple for a genre that desperately needed it. And right now, that's enough. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time, so if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit really helps me out. Also, go ahead and check out the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog, or maybe buy one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.